Hello, my name is Dennis, and welcome to my trailer park white trash mobile home kitchen. I really do live in a mobile home, in a trailer park, and this is my kitchen. Today, I'm going to be making something that I really like, but I don't dare make it too often because they're not the healthiest thing for you. New England clam cakes. I grew up with these. They were at the concession stand at the beach, at the drive-in, even the hamburger fast food places would sell them. They're a savory kind of a pastry that you spoon them up with an ice cream, spoon the batter up with an ice cream scoop and drop it into a pan of hot oil. They're deep fat fried. That's why they're not the best thing for you, but they are so delicious. When I moved permanently to California, I never saw them again. So I learned how to make them myself, and that's what I'm going to do today. So let me get into the ingredients that I use for making my New England clam cakes. The ingredients I'm using for my clam cakes, I have two 10-ounce cans of clams. These typically are 5 ounces of clams and 5 ounces of clam juice by weight in each of these cans. That's what I expect. And then I have 2 teaspoons of active dry yeast, 11 ounces of flour, 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I'm going to be using a generous grating of freshly ground black pepper. And then this is 6 cups of oil that I'm going to be using for frying. So those are the ingredients I'm using for my clam cakes. First thing I need to do here is to drain my clams. The broth I'm going to be using as the liquid for my batter. So there is my broth. And then of course the clams will go into the mixture once I'm ready to put that in. But right now, first thing I'm going to be doing is assembling my batter for my clam cakes. The can says that the dry weight is 5 ounces. So I'm going to safely assume that that is 5 ounces of clam. If this is 10 ounces, then there's 5 ounces remaining. Is it 5 ounces by weight of liquid or 5 ounces by fluid ounces? I weighed these 2 cans of liquid and they came to 11.3 ounces, so it's not by weight. I poured the 2 cans of liquid into a measuring cup and came up with exactly 10 fluid ounces. So that's what I'm working with, 5 fluid ounces per can, and that's what I'm adjusting my flour for. As I mix this, I may add more flour as I go along. I did heat my clam broth here. I'd like it to be between 105 and 110 degrees. It's showing 108. That's fine. I'm doing that because the yeast likes a nice warm place in which to start reproducing. And then I'm going to pour my yeast in there and add some of my flour. There's no sugar in this, so there isn't anything for the yeast to start feeding on. That's why the flour is going in. That's going to give the yeast some starch. I'm going to mix this up and then just let this sit for about 5 minutes just to get that yeast activated. And then I'll work in the rest of my flour, my salt, my pepper, and then check it for consistency. The finished consistency I'm looking for is something that's between a batter and a dough. I don't want it to be like bread dough, but I don't want it to be like cake batter. So we'll see when I get there. Let me give this 5 minutes to get started, and then I'll continue with my ingredients. I'm going to put the last of this flour in here and mix this in. I mentioned that I had 11 ounces by weight of flour. I weigh my flour. What if you don't have a digital scale to weigh your flour? How much should you use? Use a measuring cup, scoop your flour out of your flour container, level it off. That'll be 5.5 ounces. 5.5 times 2 is 11 ounces, so I'm using exactly 11 ounces or 2 cups of scooped flour for this recipe. And then as I go along here, if I need to, I'll add more flour. But I can tell by the consistency of this that seems to me just perfect. See, that's kind of it's not a dough and it's not a batter. It's like a very wet dough or a very sticky batter. So I like the consistency of that. That to me just seems perfect. Gonna run my flour in there, my salt, and then as I mentioned, black pepper. I like black pepper in these things. I just think black pepper makes them taste perfect. Mix that in. I have my bowl on a rubber mat because otherwise it just makes too much noise. And then finally I'm going to put my clams back in and just fold these in and try not to get them all over the kitchen. These are baby clams, whole baby clams, but if you can find chopped clams instead, you can use those. It doesn't really matter. What I usually do is go to the warehouse store in town and buy the big, like 59 ounce can of clams, the industrial commercial size, and then I portion it down, seal it into little plastic bags like I do my Lazy Man meals, and then freeze it. And then I've always got clams in the freezer. I wanted to work with the I wanted to work with the canned clams this time because I was just curious to know exactly how much fluid is in each can. Okay, so that's in there. That's ready to wrap up. I'm going to put plastic over the top of this and then let it sit on top of the refrigerator where it's warm for about 30 to 45 minutes. A lot of recipes use baking powder rather than yeast. I'm not happy with the results when using baking powder. I've tried both. I've made these so many times, these clam cakes, that I really like how they come out using yeast. I'm heating my oil up to 375 degrees. I'm using a digital thermometer there. I don't know whether you can see that or not. That's at 375 degrees. And then over here, I have my paper plate with some paper towels on it and my strainer. So that's what I'm going to be using for straining for draining rather, my clam cakes. All right. And then I'm going to be using an ice cream scoop to put my dough in there. But the first thing I want to do is using a chopstick. I'm going to place this in the oil and cook it for less than a minute, just enough to cook that dough because I want to taste it for salt. I'm going to let that cool for a minute. Yep, that's fine. That's what I want. My reason for using a ice cream scoop is because this is what I saw a chef or a cook using at a clam bake one time. If you've ever seen the movie Carousel, I'm going to set my timer for 4 minutes. About every minute I'm going to just flip those over if they don't turn over on themselves. I can see this one has already turned over on its own. If you've ever seen the movie Carousel, there's, I think, a hilarious song in there about having a clam bake. That's what we did in New England. We had clam bakes. And one of the things you often had at a clam bake was clam cakes. At this temperature, these are going to brown very quickly. See how that one turned over on its own? Oftentimes they will. If this one doesn't turn over pretty soon, I'll do it on its own. I'll turn it over rather. What's happening when it turns over is this side is full of dough, but underneath it's got a lot of air in it because it's expanded some. So the air eventually becomes light enough that it flips the cake over. All right, I'm going to flip this one over. There we go. And I'll keep flipping these over. Once they get cooked pretty well, they usually don't flip over on their own as easily. It's just that first time around. And you can even press them under the oil like that to have them cook more evenly. So I have a lot of these to cook. Again, they're going to go about 4 minutes each. I'm monitoring my temperature to keep it between 375, 350, 375. I'm going to get about probably 18 to 24 of these by the time I'm done. These are actually starting to look done to me, so I'm going to take these out, let them cool a little bit, and then I'm going to actually cut them open and see if the batter is cooked all the way through. Check these out. Look at that. My New England clam cakes. I ended up with 21 of them, which is what I figured, 18 to 24. I do have to mention a couple of things. One is after I cooked the first one, I cut it open to see how well it was cooking inside. After 3 minutes, it was fully cooked. So I adjusted my time down from 4 minutes to 3 minutes. Also, the clam cakes we had in New England were not lumpy like this. And the reason why, evidently or obviously, is because they were mostly just dough. They put very few clams in them, or if they did use clams, or much of them, they were chopped up kind of small. These are whole baby clams, so they're going to make this more lumpy, browned look to them. New England clam cakes. As far as how to serve these, you don't need to do anything. Just put them on the table. They don't need any garnish. Just serve them warm. Actually, what I'm going to be doing with these, there's a gentleman up the street who lives with his parents. He has Down syndrome and he loves my clam cakes. So whenever I make these things, I always give most of them to him. I'm trying to lose some weight, so I don't need these in the house, but I do want to see how this tastes. It's very soft, like very fresh, tender baked bread. It has the flavor of that clam broth, just a little bit salty, just salty enough for a treat like this. And of course you can taste the clams in it. That is really good. Try them, New England clam cakes. I think they're fantastic. For a printable PDF copy of this recipe with step-by-step photographs, visit the White Trash Cooking website and look on the home page or in the recipe archive.